We're so thrilled today to have early childhood expert Dr. Kathryn Peckham. She is fresh back from China, having taught some early years graduates for the last few months. And today she's going to be discussing school readiness, the truth of it all. So interventions, how children think and learn over what they actually know, the emphasis on the early learning goals, the research which suggests that the earliest foundation stage profile could help identify special educational needs early, and nurturing the foundations early and how we can find better ways of doing this. First of all, a little bit about Kathryn. She's the founder of Nurturing Childhoods, and she's an advocate for rich and meaningful early childhood experiences. She delivers online courses, training, seminars. She works closely with families. She's an active campaigner for children's rights, and she contributes to parliamentary papers as well. She does guide local councils and practitioners globally and is an acclaimed author and member of parliamentary groups. She teaches a master's at the Centre for Research in Early Years, and she's the author of Developing School Readiness, Creating Lifelong Learners. And there will be in the webinar, in the email that comes out after the webinar, some links to her books with a special discount for those that attend today. So without further ado, over to you, Kathryn.
Kathryn, you're on mute.
Okay, I'm being told, there we go. So can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes.
Perfect, wonderful. So yeah, it's great to be back with you all again. I'm absolutely thrilled to be at another parental webinar, and really looking forward to talking to you all today about school readiness. So what I'm going to try and do is share my screen with you. So just let me know. Are you now seeing?
Yep.
My screen. Yep, that's perfect. Wonderful. Okay, so so we're here today talking about school readiness and the truth of it all. So I am going to talk to you about all kinds of different new research that's coming out. You know, I've been speaking on this topic of school readiness for years. Sometimes it feels like we're making huge strides forward. Other times it feels like, you know, we're still doing the same old things in the same old ways. And we really need to start thinking above and beyond those early learning goals and look into that wider picture. So today, in my time with you, I'm going to share with you all kinds of different new research that's coming out in the field. And if that's what you're interested in, then I'm going to share tons and tons of links and publications and research papers with you at the end. But obviously our time here today is very precious, so I'm not going to go through all of that research in fine detail. The links are all there. If you're interested, please do go and have a look, check it out. And if there's anything you want to talk to me about, you know, you've got all my my links, my email addresses and everything plastered all over the place. So please do get in touch. I'm also going to share some practical different guides and things with you as well, and things that you know, if you're working with young children and you want something really catchy to just embrace straight away, get moving, get going with something slightly different with the children that you're working with, I'm going to share a lot of that with you as well. So on top of me talking to you, there will also be that wonderful opportunity at the end for some Q&A where we can have a good old chat and you can ask me about anything that you want to. Like Gail was just saying, I've got a lot of experience in practice, a lot of experience sharing these ideas on the global scale. So anything you want to ask about, anything that you're interested in, we can have that lovely Q&A opportunity at the end. So let's have a look at it all then. So, you know, when we start talking about school readiness, you know, it's something that can be a really emotive topic. And I think a big part of the reason for that is because, you know, we've all had a childhood. We've all had that experience of going and starting school. We know what that was like for ourselves. And now when we're talking about the children in our lives, whether that's as a practitioner wanting the best for our children, or whether it's as a parent that you're working with and then wanting the very best for their child going out into that school environment, you have all of those experiences of your own childhood. You remember what it felt like to sit in that classroom, whether you loved it, whether you hated it. Everybody has that experience. And so everybody has that opinion. And sometimes it can be very difficult to do right by that child, whilst at the same time having all of that knowledge, all of that experience, all of that weighing down on you. So it can be quite an emotive topic of conversation. And at the same time, you're trying to do best by whatever management structure you're working within, whatever county council guidelines you're working within. So the whole thing can become quite a difficult and complex playing field. So let's break that down a little bit today as we keep all of those different perspectives in our minds, but we also continuously focus all of our attention back to that child in front of us, because if we don't, who will? And they, at the crux of it all, the center of it all, should be that child, regardless of the manifestos and the guidelines and the learning goals that we might also be working towards. Okay, so when we start thinking about school readiness then, and we start thinking about that first day of school for that children, we can be swept into that idea of, like, you know, this is where education starts. This is where this educational journey starts really making sense for this child. But of course, they've been learning from, you know, before the day they were born. And although this period of transition is absolutely massive and huge for this child, you know, they're now learning in a different environment with different expectations, different clothes to wear, different resources and materials they need to get to grips with. This process of learning, this is not something new. They have been doing this all the way along the line. And anything that they are going to be learning now within these different four walls is going to be based on all of those experiences of learning that they've had to date. So it's so important that we start thinking about not school readiness, but this process of lifelong learning that starts, you know, even, like I said, before they're even born, and is a continuously molding process that, you know, is shaped by every single experience they have. And everybody in a period of influence on it then has that duty to ensure that those experiences are mindful, and they understand those staggering processes of change that is taking place, you know, within every aspect of that child's life. So we know that children, from the minute they are born, are then learning so much. They are taking on every experience that they're afforded. They are using those experiences to make those connections in their learning. They're modifying what they think they know, they're adapting that understanding, and they're developing those skills that they are then going to take on into every future learning experience. Every experience is then informing that process, and it's all going to have that huge impact on how well they then do in that classroom. And that's true of the really positive experiences of learning and purposeful discovery, but it's also true of those moments that are steeped in frustration. And the disturbing truth is that we need to acknowledge, if we can make any further inroads in this, is that our children are not doing particularly well right now. Here's an interesting piece of research. Like I say, I will constantly be flagging different bits of research if you'd like to delve a little bit further. And this is a really interesting one. But the educational attainment levels of children in the state-funded schools in England are lower than in many other countries with comparable levels of economic development. And this has substantial differences with our school readiness at the individual, at the school, and at the local area levels, with those long-term implications for the individual themselves and for society more widely. So out of 41 industrialized countries, we know that we are in England, only just above average levels of English, maths and science are being realised. We are 23rd for primary and school inequality and 16th for secondary level inequality. You know, and that's huge. That's based on the reading scores at 10 years old. That's based on reading scores at 15 years old. So these inequalities, this kind of being 23rd in line of all these industrialized countries with comparable kind of levels, that we're coming in at 23rd place for our reading scores for our children at 10 and 15, that's huge, that's staggering. And that is a huge amount of work that still needs to be done. We are then, you know, when we take on the data of all the OECD countries, we have like 67% on average of our scores of educational attainment, which looks at all the different levels of English and maths across those different countries. We have a 9-month attainment gap at age 11 in our children. And by the time these children reach the age of 16, that is an attainment gap of something closer to 2 years between our children. You know, on top of this, children in the UK are reporting some of the highest levels of unhappiness. And when interviewed at 15 years old, only 53% of children are stating that they're actually satisfied with their lives. I mean, that is huge. That is a staggering amount of children that are really struggling, who are really suffering. And like I say, if you want the links to all of that data, if you want to read on a little bit further, then please do. The OECD that I was just referring to there is the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. And this comes from Programme of International Student Assessment, the PISA research and data that is gathered here. But in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say here is that whatever it is we're doing in this country, we're not doing it well. These children are going into school, they are significantly behind other countries, they're significantly behind in terms of those core subject areas, and even more important in my mind than all of that is that their mental health is suffering throughout these processes. Now, obviously, these are very complex areas that we're talking about here. It is not a result of just one thing. Children are complex little creatures with all kinds of different things affecting their levels of happiness. But these are staggering results that we cannot turn a blind eye to. And we need to start thinking outside the box. We need to start thinking in different, more complex ways if we're going to start making a difference to these young children's lives. To then understand some of these differences, then we need to look at a wider idea of what development means in the early years and recognise that it depends on a number of interlinked factors, some of which I've popped on this slide here for you to have a look at. Things like, the gender of the child, the month of birth, the month in which they were born, what kind of economic deprivation they're living within, their ethnic backgrounds. There are lots and lots of different things that will impact a child's readiness for that classroom, will impact how well they do when they get there, the experiences they have and how that's related. And when we bear in mind that a lot of the data from these pieces of research that I'm referring to here, this is even without that disproportionate impact that COVID had on all of these children and how influential that is now. And we know that the impact of COVID had an even greater impact on these children that were suffering already. So we need to really start thinking about what it is that we're doing with these children and how we're supporting them. There are, of course, many different local authority interventions that are out there and trying to do something to support these children. But what we're also seeing is that despite this, on a national and local level, there are still striking differences in the experiences these children are having and the impact that then has on their abilities and their attainment levels when they get to that school classroom. We're seeing that our girls are statistically speaking, seem better able to overcome some of these challenges and are considerably more likely to exceed those expected levels on their early learning goals. But all of our children are still facing that real unfair disadvantage even before their first year of education. So what I'm saying here again is that we have got to stop looking at a child's development simply through the lens of school readiness measures and look much more complexly, much more intrinsically. We have got to start getting involved with our parents, with our carers of our children, if we are going to fully understand and nurture each and every child, rather than just expecting to put these early learning goals in place, put every child through that same set of hoops that we need them to jump through, when we know that children are far more nuanced than that. Their lives are far more dependent on all of these different factors that a simple set of early learning goals just cannot capture. So if then we are going to nurture and ignite a child's lifelong learning potential, we do then need to start recognising each individual child as having that really strong response of their own. That they come into this world, they come into that day, that moment in front of you in that classroom with all of those experiences behind them, and they are going to respond differently in every which way. So to do that effectively, we need then, like I say, to recognise children as more than that representation of their early learning goals, and instead recognise and embrace those continuously developing characteristics and abilities. And we need to do that now as they progress through their early years. We need to recognise it as they take that huge monumental step into that different learning environment. And we need to continue to recognise that through every single phase of education. No child is a representation of their grade boundaries, their early learning goals, how well they did in that test. They are far, far more nuanced than that. So, in other words, it's not just looking at that child in terms of what they know and what they can do, but it's about what they think they know, what they can do with what they understand, and start looking at some slightly different nuanced characteristics. So here's another study that looked to do just that, which looked at rather than just what a child knows, but what they can think about what they know, what those different metacognition levels are like. So not just what they can demonstrate to you about what they can show you they know. So can I count to 20? Great, well done. There's a tick in that box. But okay, so you can't. What can you do with that understanding? What are you thinking about this problem that we've put in front of you? And a lot of studies are beginning to realize this and starting to look at these deeper attributes of what it means to be ready to learn. So when we start looking at school readiness, or that preparedness for the classroom, we need to think about all of those social, cognitive and emotional skills that children need to succeed in that academic environment. However, we know that the most commonly measured aspect of school readiness is still whether children have accumulated that basic knowledge that they need to understand what is taught in school. So kind of what language do they know? What numbers do they know? But it's so much more important than that. And we need to start looking at these studies that are repeatedly demonstrating, again, like I say, that it's not what a child knows or what they can do that is important, but how they think. That metacognition, the knowledge and skills that they need to acquire new knowledge. What are their executive functions like? Those skills to plan and execute their goals. How do they manage some of those different aspects? Because when we don't, our children, and especially those from economic or racial minorities, are placed at that massive disadvantage. When what we need to be doing is looking at those skills that knowledge accumulation requires. Giving our children those tools to go on and learn not just what's on the syllabus today, but learn everything and then use what they know and understand. And when we can embrace those wider definitions, we can then support their academic, social and behavioural outcomes throughout their life. And we're far better at predicting that learning performance than any general measure of intelligence can begin to do. So we need to start really recognising some of these wider studies that are really starting to scratch that surface, not just on their early learning goals, but the much deeper nuances of what learning actually means. So in the early years then, we are fantastic at really recognising the importance of holistic and play-based learning. Yet when we start really thinking about school readiness, we can begin to lose sight of some of those ideas. And if our plans are then driven by those prescribed learning outcomes, we begin to miss those nuanced individual children in front of us and the complex processes that are within every experience. So we need to, instead of being straitjacketed by these early learning goals that we're trying to get our children to meet at the end of the day, start really recognizing that we're awesome in the early years. We know that it's so more important than boxes that children do or don't fit into, and really giving ourselves permission to understand that wider child that we have in front of us. And then with that focus, as we do really recognize it's the child that is in front of us that is so much more important, we can begin seeing that maybe it's the school readiness approach that maybe is found lacking, not that child. Because when we start doing that, if we start seeing the child who's somehow failing to meet our expectations of school readiness, we can fail to reflect on those intrinsic methods of learning, that, you know, it's not the child that's lacking, it's the way that we're measuring the child that's maybe lacking. Because if we give a child every different opportunity to show us what they know, show us what they think, show us what where their abilities are sitting and lying, then we can start to really open up their world and see just all of those amazing ways and of learning and exploring and visiting that they have to show us. We can see those discrete skills and knowledge that are going to be a part of all of their future experiences. We need to recognize these children are social and experiential learners. You know, if you are asking a child to sit still and show you something, show you the idea that you have in your head, when they're a social, experiential, physical learner, you're going to be hiding to nowhere. So follow the child. And we're great at recognizing all of this in the early years. But sometimes when we start looking at school readiness, we can begin to lose sight of that a little bit. And all of that, that representation of those complex processes of learning don't just stop because that child enters that school classroom, and they don't stop when the child progresses through those primary classrooms either. You know, even when they are that much older, even in that secondary school classroom, they haven't lost those nuanced ways of learning and developing. It's us that can start to lose those different things. So a huge, massive cry out, you know, carry on embracing that child, no matter what kind of age they might be. We know that children need to experience all of these different things if we are going to set them off into this world of the future, having really done them proud and nurturing all of their ways of learning. You know, when we think about it, you know, you think about what education is all about, think about what it is that we're doing here, what it is that we're preparing these children for. It's that world of the future. It's to go out after education is done 20 years from now, to go out into this world and be everything they can possibly be. We have no idea what that world is going to look like. You know, they are going to be living in a world we cannot possibly predict, and they need far more useful skills than displaying the knowledge that they already have up here, which we know more and more is available at our fingertips. If we want to know something, Google it, Google the answer. Our children need to be so much more capable than just regurgitating facts. They need to be able to pay attention to the nuanced environments around them. They need to persist when something is challenging them. They need to have developed the motivation to try different things, to combine different ideas, to have an idea of their own and to be able to voice it. They need to be able to remember all different kinds of things and avoid distractions. They need to experience environments with all different choices where they're thinking about different options before making really well-considered decisions. And that takes so many different experiences than just learning facts that we already know. If we want our children to sit in a classroom and not fidget during every class, then they need regular and alternative opportunities to move, to respond to their bodies that are growing and developing every minute of every day. You know, because when we give our children these experiences, they are also not only learning in all kinds of different ways, we are developing within them an amazing growth mindset, an attitude that they can do this thing, that these different environments of learning are suited to the way that they learn. That they're not suddenly finding themselves in an environment that somehow isn't suited to them, which is the experience many of our children are faced with when they're in that school classroom. And what you then get when you're in an environment where you think, this isn't suited to me, this doesn't meet and match the way that I learn and develop, then what do? You give up. It feels too much effort, too hard, which is why we have our children that in the early years, you were so keen and eager to learn and develop, find themselves in that classroom and suddenly they don't like school. It's boring. It's not a place for them. And our children are disengaging from learning when they have learned so much and at such a rapid rate during those early years. You know, and when we can give them that growth mindset where they can go on and achieve and embrace all these different ideas, That's so much more powerful than any set of achieved early learning goals that we might set them off into their future with. Here again is another study that really explores these different kind of ideas and recognises just how important these more intricate factors are. This one is a longitudinal study. So it looked at studies over time. It took many, many different studies together. And again, really recognised as is represented in this Brofenbrenner style system of learning that really recognises that children's learning and abilities and development are far more nuanced than what we are putting in front of them on this day. But it is to do with many different interrelated factors, and looks at these predictors of school readiness and early gains in academic skills. This one in particular looked at low-income families, which shows these traits in a much more pronounced kind of way, but again really shows that the development of this child in front of you is dependent on factors so much greater than the lesson plan that we're putting in front of them. So we have to have this recognition of who this child is, where they're coming from, what their background is, and we can only do this when we involve our parents, when we involve all the different adults that are influential on this child's life. And we cannot do that if we then try to judge all children with that same set of early learning goals. They are very, very different, needing different kinds of styles of interventions, needing different provocations, needing different approaches to their learning. So again, another really fascinating study. If you want to to try something different, you want to do a different way, but you need that kind of core research to back up and argue alongside you for these different ways, take a look at some of these studies. So while some of our children will go on into that school classroom and really thrive in those kind of chalk and talk type ways of teaching, many of our children won't. And when they find themselves in those environments, expected to refrain from those physical and social learning techniques that have served them so well, like I say, they will begin to disengage from those teaching styles that they are simply not ready for yet. And what can then happen really tragically is that child who is responding to every cell in their body that is telling them, you need to be physical, you need to socially engage, you need to interact, you need to have a voice and an opinion. The child in that classroom environment can be seen as disruptive, maybe showing a lack of ability because they're too quick and eager to have their say. Are you missing the question that teacher has asked? No, you just have 100 different answers for it. And what can then be absolutely heartbreaking is that as that teacher misinterprets that child as being disruptive or lacking in ability, then that child can start seeing themselves through that lens as well. Are they maybe getting the wrong end of the stick? And they can then start believing themselves to be not suited to that academic kind of environment of learning. And that can then impact them in that classroom, but it can also then impact them in personal, professional, and every part of their academic lives, which then goes on to affect them, their physical health, their social and emotional health, their well-being, and their ultimate life trajectories, simply because we are misunderstanding this child in front of us. And as educators, misunderstanding our role in not only developing their lifelong learning trajectories, but every facet of that human being as they're growing and developing going forward. So, we need to, again, start recognizing these children as far more nuanced than a set of early learning goals that we might be trying to fit them into. Another piece of great research here that is really looking at how important, obviously, quality EC programs have, and have that potential to really have those long-term effects on a child's learning outcomes. But what we also need to remember is often the teachers that we might be working with are not necessarily grounded in the early years understanding that as early years professionals that we might have. So this piece of research really looked at how important it is to work collectively, bringing and bridging that early years domain with that more primary school domain and making those links and sharing what we know. And this piece of research from Denmark really looked at interventions that join up and give teachers those supportive tools that are more explicit in what young children need and how their learning and development really takes root in these initial experiences of what that early years classroom looks like. We are now seeing different pieces of research coming out that are saying that, we've got all these years of data that have been that have originated from looking at early learning goals, looking at the EYSFP, which is those assessments that are done on children when they finish the early years stage at the end of that reception year, and see okay, they've had 6 years of being through our systems now. Let's have a look how well they've done through these all of these early learning goals that we've had in place. But what they're seeing now is, rather than seeing this as a measure of how ready for school this child is, which we can shoot holes through all day, what all of this data might actually be more useful for is identifying children that might actually be at increased risk of needing additional support from us. So it's not that the child is somehow failing to be ready for our school classroom, which is a nonsense. What it's actually really useful for is identifying those children that might need some extra support and some extra measures being put in place to help guide and support that child when they get to that school classroom. So yes, there are lots of all different cultural factors that will influence a child's experience. Like I showed you earlier, there are gender differences, there are, the month in which that child was born at differences, but we have all of this data at our fingertips. And what it could actually be far more useful in doing is being a really useful, very early predictor of any kind of special educational needs or guidance or support that those children might need, rather than somehow labeling them as not being school ready, or labeling our programs as not being school ready, which, like I said, we can shoot holes in all day, which is maybe a topic for a whole different discussion. So what I'm trying to really convey to you here is that our children, newsflash, are very nuanced. They are complex little creatures that grow and develop in all kinds of different ways, influenced by every single experience they have had. So how can we then get one set of early learning goals, of early learning school readiness indicators, and expecting every child to jump through those same hoops? How well that child does is very much influenced by the experiences that they have throughout their early years, throughout every day, every hour of every day, every permission they are afforded. It is going to have an influence on that child's life. But rather than trying to make them meet our learning objectives, what I would like to propose, and if you've ever heard me talk before, this won't be new to you, is to propose a different idea of how we look at these children, that we put the child at the centre of what we're looking at here, that we think about the behaviours that they're showing us and the much more nuanced characteristics and developments that they are forming and developing underneath those behaviours, what those behaviours are really showing us. So like I said, we need to start to putting the child at the centre of what we're doing. We need to start thinking about really observing the behaviours that they're showing us and the behaviours that we are affording through the practices that we're doing. So things like, where are our children having those opportunities to do things for themselves? Where are they having opportunities to try out new things? Where can they be brave? Where can they have good ideas of their own? Where can they have a go at doing something? And where are we absolutely igniting those opportunities for them to have fun? Because underneath those behaviours that we are both writing into our lesson plans and learning to observe as they come back to us, our children are showing us, where are they developing their self-motivation? Where are they developing their opportunities to be independent? Where are they being curious, adaptable, courageous and confident? Because when we can really give our children those opportunities to develop those lifelong characteristics of learning, they will not only be great in that school classroom, but they will have the voice and the abilities to do great in that school classroom, and to also go on and do great in every environment that they are then presented with, on academic levels throughout the rest of their academic career, in their professional lives, and also in their personal lives, where we want them to be motivated to succeed, where we want them to have a courageous voice, to reflect back and take stock of what they've experienced before and learn from it, to be social and to be able to have fun and be playful with different ideas, and to really support them and nurture them through every day of their future. And when we can do that, when we can base our programs on these kind of ideas, then that child is going to go on and succeed in their lives, no matter where their lives go on and take them. So if you'd like to learn some more, my 3 new books are out now. Which, as Gail suggested earlier, I have discount codes for you. You can get 20% off of each of those different books. And then the 4th book in this series comes out in October, which looks at nurturing all of these ideas then in and through the primary school classroom and beyond. So taking these through what you need to be doing in the baby years, the toddler years, in those years before school, and then as that child goes on and continues throughout their school environments. And then, like I said, lots and lots of references if that is the way that your mind ticks. If you want to go and do some much more in-depth reading, tons of references there for you as well. So let me end that slideshow for you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kathryn. Do you want to stop sharing, or we still see your background?
Oh, I'm sorry. That would
That's
help,
okay.
wouldn't it? I can't.
Wow.
It's gone for me. Is that gone now?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
Everybody can turn the cameras on if you want. And then we've got some questions. My goodness, Kathryn, can I just say, when you were going through some of those statistics, I actually had goosebumps. I just thought, oh my goodness. Do you know how is that going to, what's going to happen to this next generation and the generation after that, if this is kind of projecting that's where we're going, you know? And I've got a son as well who's in that age category. It's just awful, absolutely awful, the statistics.
It really is. And, it's absolutely heartbreaking, because as a nation, when you listen to some of our amazing professionals that we have in this field, we have amazing individuals who are doing some phenomenal research out there, doing some phenomenal work. And yet something is standing in that way. And I think we all know quite what is standing in that way without me needing to spell it out. And who knows, we've had the last week, and so who knows what changes might be afoot. But as a nation, we are seriously not doing well. We know in England, I'm so proud of our profession, and yet something is failing our children. There is a massive block in the way. We know what we should be doing here, and we have that passion, we have that drive. We have just got to grab hold of something else and say, do you know what we are being spoon-fed is not enough. It is failing our children. We can show you the results, we can show you the statistics, and stand up as a profession and say, no more. We are not standing for this anymore, and our children deserve better.
Yeah, no, definitely. Debbie, you had your hand up. You can unmute yourself if you wanted to ask a question before we start asking some of the others, if you wanted to start.
I was just going to say, I'm an early years teacher. I've been teaching in early years for 33 years. And I found the last 5 years have got harder and harder and harder, because I know what I should be doing. And I know how to nurture my children. I know how to understand them, to move them forward. And you are constantly being battered down, to the point where I left in February this year. Heartbreakingly left, because I just could not take it anymore. And it is not the people trying to provide that provision. It's you're constantly being battered and put down and not recognised for what you're doing, and you're doing your very, very best. The system is broken, and we all know, all early years professionals know all this, we understand this, but it's just the messages aren't getting through. The research is coming through. There is so much of it. Why are people not listening? This is our future. And it's just heartbreaking. It really is heartbreaking. And those statistics, like you said, just, compound all of that we do know it, and it's just heartbreaking. Anyway,
thank you for sharing, Debbie. Thank you. That's very sad that after all those years that future generations are not going to get your expertise, because you're not alone in that. So that is very sad to hear. So Kathryn,
I work for a charity now though, and we support the home learning environment and building relationships with children not deprived. So I'm still doing something that I'm passionate about and
fantastic.
that I love. Just in a different way.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear that, Debbie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kathryn, you touched about parents, and that's one of the questions as well that came up. We've had that, in fact, quite a few times. So it's difficult, isn't it? Because we have these children with us for a period of time during the day, but then they go home. So how can we support the parents as well to kind of mirror and to support them, whatever you're trying to do within the setting, to try and take that home? Have you got any tips for some of the practitioners on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I worked in industry for a long time. I managed nursery settings. I was a director of one of the large chains for a while. And one of my biggest frustrations was working with management and helping them to understand it all, but also working with parents, because we, as Debbie was just saying, we absolutely do know. We know how to nurture these children, and it is that constant battering down will often come from the parents' quarter as well. But parents, forgive, bless their cotton socks, we need to forgive them here, because they are influenced by social media. They're being influenced by what they're reading. They're being influenced by all of this this noise that is coming out, that it's very, very difficult to to see the wood for the trees a lot of the time. So when I stepped out of working within the profession hands-on, that is where my focus first of all went. So all of my work is directed not just to practitioners who, you know it, you absolutely know it. You have, you have seen the light, as it were. But we need to get those messages to our parents as well. So all the courses that I have on nurturing childhoods, there is the course for the practitioner, but there is also the course for the parent, having the same messages with the same ideas. This latest set of books, my first book that I wrote on school readiness was very, well referenced. It was very much for the practitioner. This new series is written for parents as well. The language in there is very much for parents to start understanding that and to see the light. And I think, every time I lecture and present all over the world, and it doesn't matter what audience that I'm stood in front of, what I always get at the end are those parents, and they might be there as managers of settings, but they are also parents. They always come to me at the end and go, oh my God, if only I had known this when my children were much, much younger. You have helped me to see it in such a different way, is the first thing. But then also, but it's not rocket science. Why didn't I see it this way before? And it is that message that we need to get back to these parents. There's really simple things that can make all the difference in the world. And it is not about sending your child to a nursery that is twice the price. It is not about buying all of these expensive resources or all of these workbooks. It is about changing attitudes. It is about opening their eyes, helping them to see that child in front of them, to recognize the behaviors that our children are showing us, which is why I've tried to distill everything I know into those set of 6 behaviors that we can keep in mind, and that can be a part of our everyday, and not just a practitioner with a qualification in child development, but also a 17-year-old mum who is honestly going, I don't know which way up this child goes, and that we can start embracing that. And because if we don't, we are seriously disadvantaging our children, and for me, when you look into the face of any child, no matter what age they are such a wonderful bundle of potential and possibility, but you have got to see them for the child they are, not measuring them against some arbitrary set of standards that, we could argue about all day till the cows come home. We are looking in the wrong places, and every minute of every day that we're looking in the wrong places, we are disadvantaging our children and society as a whole.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. So powerful, and I said in these webinars, and I said that's on the last webinar for anybody who joined last month, But every time I sit on one of these, exactly what you've just said there, because as a parent as well, you think, oh my goodness, if I had only known how you could have done something differently? Because in my generation, when I grew up, my goodness, there was so much authority and so much respect as well, isn't it? And if the teacher said something, there was so much collaboration with the parents, but there seems to be this massive, and it's like you say, there's a lot of social media that is influencing that behaviors from parents as well, but it is very difficult. I don't envy any practitioner, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I do envy from the change you can make from and the impact you have on the children's lives, but to deal with that kind of behavior as well, I don't, that's the part I don't envy.
It really is. And the really sad truth here is that when you turn to the internet, as we all do, or you turn to social media or any kind of thing like that, it is not the truest voice that is shouting the loudest. It's the one with the biggest budgets behind it. And that comes from somebody trying to sell you something. And so, you are not going to get the genuine answer for what you need here. You are going to get the company with the biggest pockets trying to sell you the most stuff, and parents, are looking, we're all very, very busy. I'm a parent myself. You are looking for that quick fix. My child's having a meltdown. How do I sort this? How do I fix that? And you're grabbing hold of these answers, which are not necessarily the best way forward, which is why, parents need that kind of no nonsense. Look at this. Let me explain it to you. But at the same time, our children are complex. And sometimes, they take a minute,
Definitely. One of the questions we had, because as you think these babies who was there during COVID, they are now starting to go, that's going to be that first year of school. And do you think that could also be an impact of the studies we're seeing? Because that's one of the questions we've had. How has COVID impacted babies and toddlers that now are going to go into that school age and heading for reception?
It's impacted all of our children tremendously, and as we know, working in the early years through the COVID pandemic and beyond, it's had those staggering differences with the way that our children have grown and developed, and not just our children, but the whole world went through it. So it's not only impacted those children, but our parents had a very different experience of being parents during those years, and the reliance they had on the screen, that not just for themselves, but if you were a parent pre-COVID, stay-at-home mum, you were probably playing with your child or whatever, but during that COVID pandemic, suddenly you were working from home, you were in front of a screen. What did you do with your child? You entertained them with the screen, so it's not just the child's experience that changed, it happened to the whole world, and everybody's experiences changed alongside all of those, every technological method of entertaining your child also developed hugely because there was that great earning potential there. So it's so much easier, and it was advocated. It was, this is the great thing to do with your child. Come in front of this, instead of getting out and about and socializing and doing all those different things. So yeah, a massive impact on our children in all kinds of different ways. And as we know, our children, every experience you have is influenced so heavily by the experience you've just had, and that experience is influenced by the one before that. So these are not going to stop influencing our children ever. This is going to stay with them forever, and we've got to start putting these different measures in place and start looking at our children through different lenses, seeing the impact that that's had, and actively doing something about it, not expecting that we can put something in place so they can meet the same milestones that we've always been looking for, because it's just not going to work, and we are massively disservicing these children.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kathryn. One of the things you covered today, that transition isn't just, oh, now it's July, let's prep them, for going to transition, because that's a longer journey. But is this, as one of the questions we had, is there a checklist that you would potentially advocate that say these are the things to cover, and is there like a time frame that you would suggest that working practice starts becoming in practice?
Yeah, I mean, I look at, school readiness literally starts from the moment that child's born. If you imagine, if you want that child to start school, be in that classroom and be confident, be able to listen to that adult, to listen to that teacher, to understand what that teacher's saying, to hear an instruction such as, right, children, I want you to go to your drawer, get out your book, bring it back, and get on with something. You know, if you want that child to be ready for all of that, they need to understand how language and conversation works. They need to understand how to hear something, keep it in mind, and go and do something without being distracted, or, oh, something's just blown past the window. You know, and all of that starts from the moment you look in that child's eyes and you engage with them. You send them that message that, you know, even as they're babbling at you, what you're saying to me is important. I want to listen to you. I'm going to respond to you by babbling back to you or smiling back to you. All of those messages start from the second that child is born. And on that first day of life, they are having those experiences, which will then influence how they react to the experience on the second day of their life. And that grows and develops and, you know, and is nurturing the child that they are becoming. So all of that starts literally on day one. And we see all of that in how they're responding to those experiences. You know, how are their social skills developing? How are their, you know, even independence of a baby at 6 months old? You know, are they reaching for their sock? You know, as you've just put their sock on, are they trying to pull it back off again? You know, are they showing their character in those ways? Which is why, you know, when I started off my career, it was very much with a school readiness kind of area of interest. But my work now starts right down in nurturing those babies, because it literally does start, you know, school readiness starts from the moment that child's born. And, you know, and in terms of a checklist, absolutely, but it's not about what can this child do. It's about what behaviors are they showing me. You know, we know the language of children is behavior, you know, whether that's good, bad, or bouncing off the walls. Every time that child responds with their voice, with their eyes, with their hand gestures, they are communicating something to you. And it's about understanding and recognizing that, you know, there's 100 languages of children. It's about really, you know, becoming fluent in those languages ourselves. And, you know, that's why, you know, I've kind of distilled all of that into those behaviors that we can start looking at in children. And then, you know, understanding the different dispositions that is demonstrating to us that these children are developing.
Brilliant, thank you. Does anybody have a last question before we close off today? You can just put your hand up and unmute yourself if you have a question. No?
Oh,
do you want to, Ivy, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hello.
Oh, and Valerie, you're the same if you want to start.
Yeah, sorry. More than a question, I just have to totally agree with Kathryn about, you know, these children. Unfortunately, a lot of children that are interested in learning, which, like you say, it's natural, they want to learn, you know, they're classed as being disruptive. And this has been going on for years. You know, in my nursery, you know, you walk into the nursery and, you know, some people say, wow, you know, this is a noisy nursery. You know, I love that. I love that. They're interacting. You know, that it's wonderful. Being able to express themselves, you know, and there can be times of quiet, you know, where, you know, we need to also to listen to others. But it's I think also it's the parents, isn't it? Having that relationship with the parents and helping these parents as well to understand that their child, they know their child's precious, but they try to make them grow so quickly. And it's about having that patience, seeing, you know, their child as so amazingly beautiful in how they're growing, however quick or slowly they are, in whatever areas they are growing in, they are amazing. And, you know, I really do. I'm very interested, in fact, in this book and the course for parents, because
Brilliant,
I think
yeah. It will be on the email that we send out, Valerie. There will be a link to that, and Kathryn has kindly given everybody 20% discount on that. So thank you so much, Kathryn, for that as well. Ivy, did you have a question?
Really, it's not a question, it's just an add-on, because I work in a county where recently I've been introduced to a course that actually starts with children right from birth, as in how their brains are developed. And the course, I personally think every practitioner should go for it. It's an eye-opener. I mean, it's really, really, I don't even know how to describe it, beyond my expectation. And I thought I'll mention it and people can have a look at it, because it's for anybody working with 0 to 18 years, how things start with the children right from, parents. And then there is a course for like practitioners, and there's a course that practitioners can facilitate to parents and families that would help, because for behaving challenges and all that, it starts from when the brains are formed. And this course is called Solihull approach. I'm sure Dr. Kathryn might have heard about it. And I think it's a really, really solid one. She might want to talk about it or say something in depth about it. But I have a contact. So if anybody wants to sort of like, because it's for my county, I'm not sure everybody's from the same place where I'm coming from. But if anybody wants to know about it, I can signpost you to her, and then she can direct you to.
Yeah, by all means, Ivy, send it to marketing@parenta.com. And we can definitely share that with the email as well. But thank you so much. It's very kind for you sharing that information. Thank you. Kathryn, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, Ivy's absolutely right. It is so essential that we start right from the beginning. And the trouble is, we have a incredibly passionate workforce in this country who want to go out and learn. But the trouble is an awful lot, and I've worked in education for many, many years at every level. And the trouble is an awful lot of our courses will tell practitioners what they need to do. They don't spend an awful lot of time explaining why. So if you want your practitioners, we can tell them till we're blue in the face, I want you to talk to babies, make eye contact. I want you to take them out into the garden and play. I want you to do this, this, and the other. That's all the what you need to do. But why? It's only when you start peeling back those layers and explaining, because this is the experience the child has when you do these different things. This is the effect it's having deep within their brain. So all the courses I do courses on the website, but also an accreditation, so you can become a nurturing childhood setting when you complete the accreditation. And it peels back those layers and says that whatever level you're working at, no matter, you can have a master's in early years, but it helps you and invites you to look at what you're doing, peel back those layers and ask why. What is at the root of the decisions and practices that you're following? And what impact is that having on those children? And then supports you as you develop a real nurturing practice across all the areas of not just a learning child, but a happy child, a secure child, a well-established child that is developing through all of their areas. And just getting back to some things that Valerie was saying as well, and looking at how children grow and develop. When you look at any adult that we hire and we hold in great lofty aspirations, look at the skills and the qualities that they're showing you. They will be independent thinkers. They will be, creative, imaginative, doing all these wonderful things that, children need all kinds of dispositions. They don't just need to be able to read, write and add up. There is so much more to it. Think of the dancers, think of the inventors, think of the, creative technicians who are designing the world around us right now. It's not, there's an amazing TED talk that I'm sure that many people are familiar with that shows our education system as literally developing one tiny little part of the brain, that we're developing every child who passes through our education system in exactly the same way. Imagine if we developed every part of the brain and sent these children out into the world to do an amazing array of things. We would have cured cancer decades ago. We would have had renewable energy sources decades ago, but we don't. We don't allow children to think and be creative. And I am standing on my soapbox and saying enough is enough. Every child deserves a nurturing childhood, and we need to get out there and do this.
Oh, bless. Thank you so much. I can see Gina Bell, who's one of our previous speakers, literally air pumping but thank you so much, Kathryn. Your passion comes through a million times. So thank you so much. And thanks so much. Just quickly, everybody, I will say, just wanted to say thanks to Kathryn for giving up her time today. We know, obviously, you are an absolute expert in your field. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with all our visitors today. And again, thank you for all the other practitioners for joining. Just quickly, we won't have a webinar in August because we know a lot of settings are shut. But our next webinar is on the 17th of September, where we will be discussing everything about safeguarding, actually keeping children safe within early years. So that's a really good one. There's a lot of changes around safeguarding, so do join us for that one. And the registration link will be on the webinar email. So if you haven't joined us yet, make sure you go to parent.com and join our newsletter list where we send out free resources, free CPD training. So do make sure you go onto our subscriber list and become one of the people that will get all that information right into your inbox, and also be the first to know of all the next webinars. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. Have a fantastic day, and see you all in September. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.